Mm-hmm.
Now I'm in the right thing. Okay. Hello, everybody out there in the internet lands. Welcome to the Land Down Under Hangout. And tonight we are discussing The Bird King, which was my pick, by G. Willow Wilson, with its most gorgeous cover, which pretty covers.
Very pretty cover.
Yeah. So yeah, this was my pick. I'd actually bought this book in 2019 when it came out, so I actually pre-ordered it. It was beautiful, mostly because I liked my previous read of G. Willow Wilson, which was Alif the Unseen, and so I really wanted to read this plus pretty cover, and I was just like, a complete sucker. It was going to happen no matter what. So let's start off with everybody's impressions. Kim, you want to go first?
All right. I kind of enjoyed it, but I felt it dragged a little in some sections with the descriptiveness of it. It sometimes made me a little bit impatient. It is beautifully written though, and I did like the story. But yeah, I had some moments where I just like, get on with it. It sort of like stopped and got very descriptive before something that I really wanted to know what happened, and it just made me very anxious. But yeah, otherwise I enjoyed it. I like the story. I like the characters. Yeah, I'll talk more about it later.
Mm-hmm. Bobby?
I liked it. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it, and I'm not exactly sure why I didn't love it. And I finished it this afternoon, so maybe I haven't had it long enough time to sort of parse through why I wasn't enthralled with it. But I did finish it, and I absolutely want to read Elise. I found that one next, and I was like, no, that sounds much more my jam. Yeah, I think I found that I was comparing it a lot to another book that we read last year, and also, yeah, so we'll talk a little bit about that later.
Fascinating. I think every single one of us finished it today.
Yeah.
David finished it last night. So.
Oh, okay. Exception.
Very diligent. I didn't get it. It felt like a joke that I didn't get. Like it just, yeah. I enjoyed some of it. For me, it had a bit of a fairy tale-ish vibe to it, which I kind of enjoyed.
I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah. But yeah, mostly I'm just left feeling like I don't get it.
Yep. Kirsten?
Definitely agree about the fairy tale vibe. It reminded me of kind of like, when they have the adult version of traditional fairy tales. Like I remember there's Naomi Novik's ones and things like that. And I did wonder whether that was a cultural thing, whether there was a story there that I didn't know. I did read it. I read it in 2 sittings, which I can't usually do if I don't at least like the book a little bit. So I liked it. I didn't, same as I think, who said it? Was it Bobby?
Yeah, Bobby.
Liked it, but I didn't love it.
Yeah.
But there's nothing really jumping out at me that I'm going to go, I really disliked this or I really disliked that. But there's nothing that made me go, oh wow, I really loved that sort of thing. So quite enjoyed it, and I enjoyed it enough to keep reading. I found it quite an easy read, but I didn't love it.
Yeah. No, I'd agree with that for myself as well. I didn't love it. I enjoyed myself well enough. Similar to Elizabeth, I was sort of going, what is going on here with some of the elements of it? And I can guess which book Bobby's talking about. But I particularly enjoyed certain elements of it. One of my favourite parts of reading it was the fact that it led me off on tangential learning. There was a whole heap of stuff that I didn't know about the surrender of the kingdom, the Alhambra. Can't even say it at the moment. Thank you. And all of that I very early on, probably within the first third, was going and looking up and reading up on, and I was like, and at the end of it, I was sort of like, that was my favorite bit. That's when I was like, oh, I really enjoyed finding out all that information. It wasn't actually in the book though, but the book let me go and learn it, so that's a good thing. And I particularly enjoyed the friendship between Fatima and Hassan. So that was sort of my favorite element of it, but it was a very interesting thing. Anyway, let's get into talking about it. Do we want to go on to what Bobby was talking about first up, since it's been raised?
Which bit?
The book.
Oh, it reminded me a lot of the one that I picked last year in a lot of ways. Now of course I can't remember what it was. Sorry, author, and I was just reading one of your other books tonight.
Was it the Mexican one?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. Oh God, I can't even.
Well, I'll find it. Sorry.
Oh, Gods of Jade and Shadow.
That's
Yes.
it. Gods of
that
Jade and
one.
Shadow.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, not the book I was thinking of.
No.
Oh, it was the
By
first
way-
one that came to my mind, actually. I had noticed a lot of elements of this that reminded me of that.
Yeah.
Actually, that is much better
Yeah.
one that I was thinking of. I was actually thinking of The Starless Sea, because it reminded me so much of sort of the way things just sort of stopped making sense towards the end. And I was just like going,
That book made sense to me. This one did not.
Yeah. I think.
yeah, well, I'll admit that one made less sense to me, and this one made more sense to me, but it still had that element of what sometimes happening, and I was just like, okay, just roll with it. But I found this one much more readable for me.
And I'm in the middle of
But
it.
I agree. I think it's more like Gods of Jade and Shadow more than Starless Sea, now that you pointed that out.
I also
Yeah.
really got vibes of Mogget. So if anyone's read the Sabriel books,
Yeah.
that absolutely reminded the Jin Bikram reminded me of
I
Mogget
see
so
that.
much.
Yeah, actually, now that you say that, although I can't think of Mogget without hearing, because I
Tim
listened
Curry?
to the audiobook and it was the Tim Curry
Yeah.
narration.
Oh God.
That's
So
fantastic.
it's so good. So good. Even if you've read them before, I'd highly recommend listening to the audiobook for
It's
those
so
books,
good.
because
Yeah.
Might do that.
But yes, like I was getting that, but there was, I think the fact, because it was such a fantastical adventure setup, that's why I was really thinking of the Silvio Moreno Garcia book from last year.
No, I agree with that.
Which
And
is
the
also
way
why
that it was.
I don't understand why I don't like it, because I liked that book a lot. And I didn't, I was like, this one didn't invoke a strong feeling.
I think that for me, like thinking about the similarities between the two, I think both of them have that sort of very grounded in reality element, moving towards the fantastical towards the end. And I think that for me, the difference between the two and why this one didn't land so well is the fantastical elements that we got from Gods of Jade and Shadow was really quite, I don't know, it just worked really well how she blended them together in that book. Whereas in this one, I just was like, okay, just roll. Just keep rolling. It's okay.
Yeah.
David, you're with us. Do you want to share your thoughts of the book?
Yeah, I have mixed emotions because it was just all over the place. Like, I didn't expect the Spanish Inquisition, obviously.
And no one made
Had
that
we
joke.
not made
I
that
didn't
joke
want
yet?
to do it. I
Yeah.
really wanted to. I kept my mouth shut.
But it just kept going. Like, it was, it reminded me of Charlie the Unicorn more than anything else, which is the David reference. Because at the end of the day, like, someone gets taken on an adventure, against their will, they're duped, and all of a sudden they find out there's a big Nana King, and it didn't really mean very much. Like, it was great, but it felt like it was almost going somewhere several times. Surprisingly historically accurate to a degree when I quickly read up about it, which was actually really, really interesting. But yeah, I think the bit that bugs me the most is that the Not Inquisitor was psychic and therefore had access to like an omnipotent like eye worm that was built from the fears of like the protagonist, and that's meant that that they would just show up at the worst possible time because they knew everything, which seems a bit. It actually, if anything, took away a lot from the whole chasing sort of thing, because it's just okay. So she was just there waiting at the worst possible moment, and there was a lot of angst and character development in the middle, but it really seemed a bit contrived with that. The book probably would have done a lot better without the supernatural tracking aspect, I think. It would have probably flowed a bit better because there would have had to be some reason for the encounters, even if they were like ludicrous or just hideously bad luck. They weren't literally magic.
Like
I would
the
agree.
monk with the sending the signals with the flags. I was like, oh, that made sense, and I
then you realize it didn't actually happen.
yeah.
I would actually agree, but I would add in that the Jinn helping at particular times, because there was two of them, was, and even then at the end there was multiples of them, was also a little bit contrived as well. Like they were there to help when they were needed, and then they were gone, and then they would come back when they were needed to help, and it was like, are they really that interested in helping? Why are they there?
Like the last time Vikram showed up in the shipwreck, I'm like, where the hell did Vikram come from? Where the hell did he come from?
He was supposed to need to go and recuperate from what had happened when they'd gotten onto the boat.
Yeah.
But suddenly, only a couple of days later, he was fine and able to show up again. It was like, okay.
I don't think he was physically there though. I think he was just in her head.
No,
At that
he
point?
was actually there because he was on the island after that, and the people saw him.
And he was carrying her and things.
Yeah.
I don't know why Vikram cared, because so I don't know because Vikram made a big deal about not caring.
He was Mogget from Sabriel.
Yeah.
He was bound to help because the person he owed a debt to said he had to.
But he'd already fulfilled the debt.
I agree with you, David, but I think that the point was that he was actually more emotionally attached to Fatima than he admitted to, and he was wanting to help, but he was a Jinn, so he didn't admit to that kind of stuff, and so he was using, I've got to do this to pay back this person more as an excuse.
And I think it doesn't really bring up the fact that he'd known her since she was little. Even if she didn't know him, he knew her from since she was a little girl. So there was probably more emotional attachment that the writer didn't really build on or reference enough to remind us about it.
Yeah, and she did actually, take him in once he'd been beaten what she thought was half to death.
Exactly.
And
And that made some sense. It was, and I didn't mind that he kept helping. I was just sort of like the showing up again after the shipwreck straight away was just like, that seemed fast.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the only way I could reconcile that was once they got to the bit about how time works differently in that area, I was like, oh, well, that must be what it is because nothing else makes sense. But I really had to fight with that up until that point.
That actually makes more sense. I'm actually willing to accept that. Like you said, I'm going to take that one and make it work for me. But yeah.
You have to make it work. It doesn't work itself, really.
I think there's just too many things in this book that if there was half as many, then they would all be really awesome because there are amazing ideas to explore and obviously behind them. But all together, they shadowed each other out. It could have been an amazing book about cartography. Sure, maybe
I think that was
interesting, but
I think that was the thing I was a bit disappointed about because the part at the beginning where he quickly draws the thing and then they fall through the floor, I was like, that was really cool.
Yeah. And
I was expecting him to be doing more of that, like drawing maps that take them to places, and they go through doorways that, which didn't really.
She didn't really do, because I was just like, okay, you can't draw one to go like 200 kilometers or something like that, which is really weird because didn't he draw tunnels in some other town? And I'm like, what? But I'm like, even if you just went like 100 or like 50 kilometers or 20 kilometers, considering how slow transportation is, you could have gone pretty far by just keep doing that.
Or like when they're being chased, like go around a corner and draw a quick thing and then.
Yeah, especially once he created the cave, it was like, okay, you've got some pretty serious skill sets here.
I mean, understandable after they escaped from the camp because he was tortured. And I was like, I'm so glad that happened off the page because I probably would have quit if I had to read about that happening because the aftermath was bad enough. It's one of those things that I really struggle with. And I was actually worried when the Spanish Inquisition showed up at the beginning. I'm like, oh God. I hope we're not going to be reading a bunch of gruesome things because I'm going to quit.
The thing is, I was actually more worried about her getting raped initially in that chapter. I was like, oh shit. I knew he was going to be getting tortured. I knew that. I sort of settled my mind on it, but I hadn't really sort of prepared for myself for her to get raped. The fact that she didn't was, thank you very muchly appreciated. But I was not prepared for it at all for some reason. And meanwhile, something to raise, they kept going on about him being a sodomite and everything, but the general was planning to do something to him.
Oh yeah.
It certainly sounded like it was going to be sexual.
Are you implying that they're hypocrites? Mel?
Oh my gosh, Mel.
I mean, there was a lot of talk about how
It wasn't that they weren't obviously hypocrites. It was more along the lines of the fact that it was such a blatant, obvious hypocritical thing to do. Like, he was literally accusing him of it and then said a sentence later that he was going to do it to him. And
he would have been justifying that in his mind, that it wasn't for his sexual pleasure, because he actually said, this is how you control people. This is the reason you do this, is to show them that they've been beaten and that they, you know, like, he's doing it for power. He's not doing it for his own, like, and I'm sure that would be how he'd be justifying it in his head, you know, like, oh, well, I'm not getting anything out of this, I'm just teaching them a lesson, kind of thing.
And there was a lot of referencing about how people just turned a blind eye to Hassan because he had a skill that everyone wanted. So everyone knew he was sleeping, he had men over in the castle, but they were ignoring it on purpose because they wanted him to be this other thing that they needed. So similarly, it's not a general who's in charge of everyone will turn a blind eye.
Yeah, no, we're talking about when they were in the camp. And
no, I understand. No, I'm saying that culturally there was already a discussion about how people would turn a blind eye to that if it meant they got what they wanted.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, that's all I meant.
Hassan does get my vote as the whingiest character in the whole novel. Not about not about the things that are, if he's complaining about stuff that he had legitimate reason to complain about, that's one thing. Like, but in some cases it's like, oh look, there's this minor inconvenience rather than these other things that I have legitimate purposes to complain about, and I'm going to make it your fault, Fatima. Like,
yeah. Kept going off on each other about the littlest things.
Yeah.
You're like, that you have a problem with?
And yet the whole, I'm going to take this chick to right to you, that, like, I was annoyed with her.
I know. Oh my God.
How dumb are you, girl?
For sure. Although, you know, because I was thinking a bit about that, because that was something that really annoyed me. But also, like, it was a really good indication because at the beginning, I think that thought that Hassan is, you know, he's the naive one, the one who doesn't really get what's going on. But that particular choice from Fatima is one of the clearest signs that, wait a minute, she is also not as worldly. She's not she's not worldly, she's a bit naive, she doesn't really understand what's going on. And that was one of the biggest signs for me of that. And then it kind of feeds into like the whole it's a story about fools. God loves fools. And you've got these two fools basically who go on their adventure, but are still, you know, favored by God, I suppose.
One of the things though that I think's, like, in particular in the case of Hassan, is he is particularly devout, even though his way of doing it is not exactly the way that is dictated it should be done. He's probably the most devout person there is in the whole book in terms of his faith in his religion and his practice and everything on those lines. So I always felt like he was being favoured because of that, if anything else.
I think maybe
Even Luce said that at the end, that Hassan is way more devout than her. Hassan is the most devout person she knows.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think maybe the author was trying to say something there about the difference between religion and faith.
True.
You know, with like the Spanish Inquisition are like, supposedly it's all about the religion, but like they're hurting people and they're doing bad things, and they're not understanding that that's not really going along with what their religion is supposed to be about.
Gwen in particular was pointing out a lot of that sort of stuff. Is that how we say his name?
Whose
Oh,
name?
what?
Yeah.
Gwen.
I
Gwyneth?
think. Gwennick.
Gwennick.
Yeah, Gwennick.
Gwen, but
Yeah, 'cause
they
they
were
kept calling
shortening
it
it to
Gwen.
Gwen. Yeah, I got used to
Oh,
calling it Gwen by the end. I was
Yeah.
like, okay, Gwen works for me. I'm good.
I gotta run, guys. It's
All right.
Bye, David.
Okay, do not
Yeah.
do that. You can't do that with this desk. You can't put your weight on this desk. Okay.
Yeah, because Gwen's whole thing was really around that side of things. As to why he was willing to go with them and had left and everything. I mean, aside from the fact that they turned on him really at the end, at the camp. But also he felt bad about it all, and his own reflections was all about how the church wasn't what he thought it would be. And that just grew as he thought more and more about it, and as they got further and further away.
Yeah. Did anyone want to slap Far when she was in the camp and she kept doing stupid things? Like when she was in the camp and she's
Which
like
time?
stepping, I can't remember, as like the cat Jin.
Oh, right, when she's escaping.
Yeah, and she's like, step in my footprints, and she's doing that, and then she stops and stares at this guy. She's like, don't do that, and she just keeps doing it. And then they finally get around that, and then they get to the tent, and she just bolts for Hassan.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, you're so stupid. Can you please do what you're told for a minute? Because people are about to murder you.
Mm-hmm. And the whole, we've actually got to go.
And then the Jin's like, fuck it, I give up.
Well, I'm actually glad that she did do that, because from the setup of her coming into the story, it was going to be that she wasn't to be trusted entirely and things like that. And so it's like, yeah, come on.
I sort of took it as like further testimony to how much Fatima was used to being looked over and kind of invisible. And the only people who paid attention to her were either the queen or the sultan. And otherwise, she could just do whatever she wanted and no one paid any attention to her. Because she wasn't even, at that point, she wasn't even at a station within within the empire to even be allowed to have sons that would have been seen as anything important, because she wasn't one of his wives yet or anything like that. She was just a concubine, and
And also like her strong drive for freedom, even if that is detrimental.
She kind of went the other way, where she had no freedom whatsoever and knew she didn't, to going kind of drunk on it and not paying attention.
Yeah,
that's actually one of the things I kind of enjoyed about the book, though, is how it explored some of those themes like freedom and friendship and stuff, and talked about how they're not necessarily the way you expect them to be.
Yeah.
Like freedom, when you come from that circumstance, is not going to be this idealistic thing that you think it is going to be. It might actually be considerably worse than the life that you've been living, and that life might have actually been a preferable life. You had, and then also just the friendship aspect, like the fact that they kept having things that caused problems for them in friendship, not just in the journey, but also in their relationship with others. It actually reminded me a lot of a friend's friendship, where literally she is that close with her friend who's gay, that to the point where we consider that we treat them like a married couple, but they're not, and they're not together like that, but they may as well be. But how that sort of, like, he was right, it wasn't going to work for them to do it, for them to get married or anything, but also at the same time they also both got angry with each other when they would get into relationships with somebody else.
It was a whole new thing. Like, I mean, she was a concubine, he knew who she would be sleeping with. He understood that it was always there. He understood the parameters and the boundaries and the rules. And similar for her, she knew that he was sleeping around, but she also knew that he would always be there because he wasn't going to get married. So that was their relationship with each other, and that was it. There was nothing else viable. And then all of a sudden they're thrown out into a world where anything's possible. And so they're having to re-examine everything. That was one of the things I actually did like about it, is the fact that they were doing that. And I think that's pretty realistic, because teenagers go through that all the time. And even adults, like if you have childhood friends, you get to a point and something gets thrown into your relationship and you're like, what, how do I deal with this? Like, yeah.
I mean, renegotiating that stuff is fine. I could have done without them competing over the same guy.
I didn't.
Yeah,
I was just
that
about
part-
to say that. I didn't like that either, especially because it came out of nowhere. Like when they slept together, and then he's like, "You knew that I liked him," and I'm like, "Oh God, like,
In
where was
fact,
even the sexual tension between those two
Yeah,
before
exactly.
that happened?"
We could have just done without the sex entirely, and that would have been preferable.
Well, I kind of like that she got to have sex without it having to mean anything other than it was what she wanted in the moment, and she consented.
Agreed.
I mean, like, he
I liked that, but I didn't like
consented, and it wasn't an expectation. It wasn't because she was someone's property. She wanted it right then. She was already running around horny because the cat chain like got her going. Right.
There was a high emotional period where they were both like, "Oh my God, we made it, we're okay," and
We're
it wasn't.
No,
Yeah.
Again,
For neither of them, it wasn't like there was no misunderstanding about that either. It was just, this is the thing it is, and we're good. And it was only Hassan who had a problem with it. But I didn't actually get a vibe that that Gwen was ever interested in Hassan at all. And
No, but Hassan said to her, I told you that I was attracted.
Oh yeah, I don't
So
disagree with
he
that. But
was-
I think it's unfair of him to, when there was nothing, no indication in any way, shape, or form that it was going to be
but it
anything
was
reciprocated.
reciprocated.
Hassan was attracted to every single guy he met.
Exactly.
Everyone,
That's exactly
or not
the
even the
point.
guys, the jinn as well. So it's
Exactly.
like, of course, it's going to be one
So
of them.
if we went based on that as a rule for who she
Yeah.
could sleep with, she
Yeah,
can't sleep with
yeah.
anybody.
Yeah.
But
Like,
that
as soon
was
as another
his
guy
argument
comes into
too,
it, he's
though.
like flirting with them. I'm like, of course.
But, I mean, again,
He was
to get
like,
back
I'm
to
never
that
going to get a guy
negotiation.
because they'll always look at you first. And it's like, well,
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. She wasn't allowed to sleep with anyone other than the Sultan, and the Sultan was
Yeah.
never someone he was going to have.
Mm.
So it's back to that whole thing of he was allowed to want anything and everything that he could see at the palace, and not worry about there being competition. And now there is, and he's never had to face it.
And it's different for her too, because she's never been able to have a choice about who she could be with, and suddenly she does have a choice, and she's got this freedom. And that's what I liked about it. It was messy.
Yeah.
I did
I mean,
like
it's
too
not
that
everyone's cup of tea, but I did like that it was pretty real in that sense, and I was like, that's a kind of a role model thing I would want my female child to grow up seeing, maybe a little bit.
And I think in the end too, like the fact that she was having problems with him being with Deng on the island, I think it showed that it was less about him liking Gwen when she slept with him, and it was more about the way it upset the balance of their relationship every time one of them slept with someone else. That's what it was more about than anything else. Every time it changed the balance, things felt weird and off, and they didn't know how to negotiate that space properly, because as Bobby was saying, they had a different type of balance in the palace, and they hadn't figured out the new balance now.
Yeah, it annoyed me when she got mad at him when he got together with Deng, because I was like, well, I could forgive him more for getting annoyed with her, because it felt more like he was jealous because he wasn't getting any and she was, rather than being like, I don't want you to be with anyone. Whereas with her, it more felt to me like she was like, I knew that you slept with men, but now that I'm seeing it happen, I don't like it.
I thought it was more about the emotional attachment.
Yeah,
I thought it was
yes,
too.
we
I was
only
really
ever had each
investing
other
himself in this
emotionally.
other person. Sorry, Kim, I talked over you.
Yeah,
What?
sorry.
Go ahead.
They never had to share each other emotionally.
Yeah.
That's the thing. They're partners that they had that weren't emotional attachments. So they never had to even think about sharing each other emotionally. Emotionally, they were each other's.
And that was the statement she made towards the end about the fact that you could love more than one person and in more than one way, and things on those lines.
When she said that, I was like, yes, hello.
But they never really had a chance to. Like, they'd grown up and they didn't love, or they loved each other, and there was not that many other options. Like, I don't think Hassan ever thought about loving one of his lovers, because he couldn't really have a relationship, and neither could she.
She wasn't in control of her life more so, but he also wasn't really in control of his life.
Yeah.
And they were in the palace as well.
Yeah.
So, but in the end, I thought, and I don't know if this is what they were trying to say about this. But one of the things that it made me think of is the fact that, to me, love and like in relationships and stuff is not all that different from friendship love and things like that. It's just when you choose to take it further and things. And that was all that was sort of in their way, in my opinion, was that they couldn't take it further because he liked men. And so I really liked that sort of exploration of that cuspy space of where you've got this extremely close friendship, but it's just not going to actually go anywhere in that respects, and how that can be messy in of itself.
I agree.
So there are things I really liked about it. It's just, I don't know, actually the things I liked the least were the fantastical elements, weirdly enough, because she didn't focus on the fantastical elements I wanted her to focus on, which was like the cartography and things like that. And I was like, oh, this weird island that sounds a bit like Atlantis.
Yeah, I think she concentrated more on the chase, which I really wasn't interested in that much, not the way she did it, and describing things. And I'm like, I'm not really interested in the things you're describing either. Just get back to this bit or this bit or this bit.
I liked the action, but I wasn't bothered by the description so much.
I think the stopping and starting of the action maybe sort of like get into the action and then she'd start just describing things. And I'd be like, you're in the middle of an action sequence, like you're in the middle of them about to get captured or killed or whatever, and you're making this long description thing, and I'm like,
I just didn't get bothered by that at all. It was just fascinating because I didn't even really notice it happening. That's why I'm sort of like, okay.
How fast were you skimming?
Sorry?
How fast were you reading it?
I think
I wasn't skimming. I did actually read it.
Because those descriptions made it very easy to skim through.
Yeah. No, I suppose that's one of the things I remember liking about G. Willow Wilson from before. Like, I remember enjoying reading the Aleph Thumb scene, but honestly, it was so long ago that I really can't really remember what I read. I just remember enjoying it. But what I do really remember is enjoying her prose. So I actually wrote that in my notes. I really like the prose. So maybe that's the difference. It's just not your kind of prose, Kim.
Yeah, I liked it, but not in the middle of the action bits. Like at the beginning, before they left, but absolutely fine in other parts, but I just felt like she kept interrupting things that I didn't want interrupted. So maybe it's just my personal choice, but she was interrupting my story in parts.
Oh, by the way, I just wanted to mention, since we've mentioned him a few times, I've decided to call the general the fuck general.
Okay.
I just noticed that. I was like, oh yeah, that's right, I called him the fuck general. I had to write things down. So I read out a quote to Nye during all of this, and he liked it so much that he went and put it up on Facebook for everybody. Oh. So, but I thought it was an interesting one. It's actually something that I think I've heard in a variation of John Green say. So I'm wondering how much she was influenced, or whether John Green got it from somewhere else and she was influenced by that. So it'd be very interesting. Anyway, once a story leaves the hands of its author, it belongs to the reader, and the reader may see any number of things, conflicting things, contradictory things. The author goes silent. If what he intended mattered so very much, there would be no need for inquisitions and schisms and wars. But he is silent. The author of the poem is silent. The author of the world is silent. We are left with no intentions but our own. I like that because it's not just talking about the authors of books, but also literally God.
Yeah.
Which I'm like, yes, that's right, guys. We do it all to ourselves.
It was very quotable in places.
Is it multiple spots where I'm just like, I'll just write this part quote because I don't have enough room to write every single quote that I want to write down. But yeah, John Green said that about authors all the time, like about once the story leaves the hands of the author, it belongs to the reader. It's got...
I mean, that's a whole area of literary criticism. So it's not really restricted to G. Willow Wilson or John Green.
Yeah. No, definitely not. Well, that's what I was wondering, because I mostly have heard it from John Green, but I was like, I feel like it's probably not just a John Green thing, but yeah.
Definitely not just a John Green thing.
No,
Good.
certainly there was a whole big
Almost, yeah,
outcry about JKR with her getting angry around fan fiction, and like that whole split between some authors are really happy for people to do fan fiction, some really don't like it because they feel
Looking
they're
at
like,
you, Anne Rice.
Yeah, God, Anne Rice.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
But not just her, but yeah.
She is like a well-known example.
Yes, especially because she's been particularly prolific about trying to prevent it, not just being vocal about it.
Well, I'm glad I read all of her stuff when I was young and didn't know any better, and now I don't have to feel conflicted about giving her any more money.
Yep.
Yeah,
I think the
Yes.
only
Really, that's
books
what
I
I stand
have,
in
I
this
still
argument.
have of hers came from like secondhand stores anyway. I read most of them from the library when I was younger.
Yeah, mine all came from the high school library.
Yep.
And a lot of Margaret Atwood. I had a really good high school librarian. Like, there was a lot of Margaret Atwood in that library.
Oh. Well, Karina would have been happy then.
Well, yeah, that was, I mean, Margaret Atwood is one of my favorites, but probably because that was like, I walked out with, was it The Handmaid's Tale? And I knew that I had something that I probably wasn't supposed to have. If you listen to the school administration, the librarian had it there, and I had a library card, and screw you, you know?
Trying to find, I think I had some articles that I was reading, but I think we might have discussed the points from those that I wanted to raise.
I was wondering what you guys thought about Fatima's anger and temper.
Oh, there was a really good quote about that.
Because I was wondering if maybe we're leaning into, you know, fiery Spanish woman trope.
Well, the quote that I've got here is page 178. I was taught to waste it. The anger she was talking about.
Yeah.
That was a good one, yeah.
Yeah.
So
I don't know if she was really leaning into that, given like what was that's the thing I did not look up. What was her actual heritage?
I thought she was mixed. I thought she was mixed Spanish and Mughal Empire.
Yeah,
okay.
That's what I got too.
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
but I mean, but regardless, I mean, like, it's not. I mean, I wouldn't say that it's a trope of just fiery Spanish women, I guess, because you've got the ethnic mother trope as well, which is the strong Eastern European, strong Eastern woman as well. So
I think it's applied to a lot of women in general as well. Like it's I would say less white women because we get away with other shit and all of that sort of stuff. But like a lot of different cultures have a problem with that sort of being applied to them, that they're always angry and things. Maybe they're angry for a reason.
I kind of it's kind of, she was pissed because she understood that there was an imbalance. She wanted it fixed. She wanted to be equal. And even the Sultan was like, fuck you, no, you can't have that.
Yeah, exactly. Here's the quote. You were taught to waste anger. It's convenient for girls to be angry about nothing. Girls who are angry about something are dangerous. If you want to live, you must learn to use your anger for your own benefit and not the benefit of those who would turn it against you.
Yeah, I love that quote. I do love that.
That was a good one.
Yeah. Well, exactly. That's what I mean. Like I've literally got another quote and another quote. She had quite a few things that I was just like, yep, she's trying to say something there, but she didn't necessarily want it to be the entire story or something.
Yeah.
So do we want to talk about the Bird King aspect?
Did anyone understand that? I couldn't quite understand what she was trying to say when she came out with "We're all the Bird King."
Yeah.
Well,
I didn't get the link.
That's the bit that killed it for me. I was
Yeah,
sort of like, I was okay.
Yeah, okay until then. Yeah.
Yeah. Before that, I was like, okay, I can see she's the Bird King. I can see Gwen is supposed to be the crow who's sort of been ostracized and left his people. And, like I could see sort of the analogy working somehow and that sort of stuff. But then when she said we're all the Bird King, I was like, okay, that's just everything's falling apart now. Then I don't understand.
No, I mean, that kind of made sense for me. Like we're talking about like the immanence of divinity and God in everything. basically.
Oh, it's a faith thing.
Sort of, yeah, because she is a character of faith, even though she's not a character of religion.
Mhm.
So the Bird King, I suppose, stands in for like a god figure.
Yeah, that's what she believed in.
That's what she believed in. And then like to see that everything is the Bird King is like everything is sacred. God is in everything. I'm not sure how that fits in necessarily with Islam, because I'm not really across like its teachings. But it's certainly it's not an uncommon thing across religions.
It is in Christianity, but I'm not so sure it would have been in Christianity at that time.
Different strains. Like it crops up in some strains of Christianity, not all of them.
No. But yeah, that as an interpretation makes a lot more sense to me, because yeah, at the time, like the whole thing with the Bird King got a bit weird anyway, especially given it was the title piece. But if that's like sort of the message she was going for at the end, it makes more sense that it was the title piece, because originally I was just like, I probably wouldn't have titled it that.
Well, that's just what I got from it anyway.
No, it makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense, actually. It's just I didn't see it.
Well, it amuses me then that is the thing that I pick up that makes sense to me, and yet the book still didn't like make sense to me at all.
But I think that it sort of helps that plot point, that discussion make sense. It doesn't necessarily make the whole island sequence, Bird King sequence, make sense as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, it really much came across to me as this is something that only she sees, and even though it may be true, like everyone else doesn't really get it. And that perhaps that comes down to the faith of her character, that she has such strong faith. But it also it's also kind of weird in a way, because it's because she's the Bird King, and the Bird King is what she had her faith in so much. Is she a character that has such faith in herself? I mean, she's very brave, so maybe yes.
Maybe that's what it's about, learning to have faith in yourself. And
maybe it's about the fact that people just need to have faith in something.
Maybe so.
Because that's one of the things that I kept thinking about at the end, when she was going, I'm the Bird King, and everybody else was working and doing stuff. And they kept talking about all the stuff everybody else was doing. But I was like, what are you contributing exactly? Which, apart from just being the Bird King. And I was like, maybe the point is that she was sort of the central point that was keeping everybody going, even if she wasn't actually the one organizing and making it happen and things like that.
She was contributing some stuff. Because there was a whole point, like there was a whole section about how she was working harder than she'd ever worked as a concubine/servant, and how everyone was sort of falling into what they seemed to have skills at. So she was contributing something. But
carrying water.
I think meaning like a skill set specifically, like something that was something.
No. I think that what you said earlier was right, Mel. So when they're preparing Luz to head off the island, she's the one there anchoring the boat. She's keeping things steady. And that is like, she's doing that like in a broader sense as well as like a literal sense.
Yeah.
She's what's keeping everyone anchored.
And I mean, Hassan did call her out on that when she was sort of like losing her shit, and she was saying, oh, it's not fair. I don't know what to do. This was meant to be you and I, and nobody else was meant to be involved. And he was like, but everyone is involved. You need to deal. Because everyone was looking to her, wanting to know what to do.
Yeah.
I wish the what was it called, the Leviathan or whatever it was.
Yeah, the big Leviathan dragon thing.
Yeah, I wish that could have gotten involved before like so many people had to die and everything. Like, come on. If you're going to bring a Deus Ex Machina in to solve the problem, bring it in time to kill everybody.
Yeah.
So Sorry, that might have been me a bit upset about the fact that they decided to kill off Gwen at the end.
Yeah.
I mean, fair.
I wasn't like super emotionally attached to him, and I certainly didn't think that like they were making out that their relationship was closer. And then I was like, is this just one of those things that people do on deathbeds where it's not actually there, but they do it because it's comforting? I don't know, but but I was still sort of like, but why did he need to die? Like, what was the point of all of that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't quite understand why Gwyneth had to die. Because I was like, I'm like, is it that she has to be alone? Because if you're going to be some sort of central like anchor point, you can't have a partnership of some sort. Other like
she does with Hassan, and even if it's not a relationship
I
of
know,
that
but,
kind.
well, yeah, so she has that, but I mean, also Hassan has someone else by that point, and he was someone who he was clearly emotionally invested in. She didn't get to have that at all. Her entire thing was you have to become the what's it I'm thinking of? Like you have to be responsible for everyone else around you. You don't get to have that. You have to be the one who makes all the hard choices.
I think it was probably more to do with the fact that she didn't want this battle to have no repercussions. And so she needed to kill some people off, but she didn't want to kill off anyone super important. But if she didn't kill anybody important at all, it would have been just red shirting. And so she had to kill Gwen because he was the least important of all the main characters. No, he was pretty functionally useful.
He was
very useful
in a lot of ways. He balanced out that thing, and Deng did not, when he came in, he did not balance out that relationship at all.
No, actually, and for a short while after she immediately slept with Gwen on the boat, I was like, are we going to have like a poly here?
Yeah.
I was hoping for that too.
Especially since they have that quote that you read out, Mel, about different kinds of love and that sort of thing. I mean, they could have gone that way.
A lot of different things that could have been done. I don't think she was trying to write a happy ending story. That's for sure.
See, okay. Now here's the thing I don't get. They were like, okay, we have to tear up the map and disappear the island so that we'll be safe. Didn't at any point stop and say, okay, guys, this is it. Who wants to get off?
Yeah.
Like, not all of them have come to the island being chased by other people. Some of them just got shipwrecked. They might want to go home sometime.
Yeah.
But I think the point was they didn't know if the person was going to make it home because they were on a bloody little tinkery boat that wasn't going to get them home because they pretty much said they loaded up loose, but it was a futile effort. She wasn't going to get home. So
Yeah,
I don't
like,
think
why are
they
you wasting supplies? Because it's going to be
So I think it was a foolish. You know what they could have done? He could have drawn another map, set them to land on the other side because he's obviously drawn it to the island before. Because you remember when she got there, she's like, it felt familiar because she always remembered the places that Hassan sent her to, drew maps for her in the palace. They were always like worn steps and broken shutters and things like that. He was sending her to this island again and again. Could he not send someone back the other way? And they could have just torn up the map afterwards.
If it was someone else, I would say so. But for Liz, I think one of the reasons they were willing to let her go was because they were pretty sure she was going to die. So but I'm still like, but you're trusting her to tear up the map.
Yeah, I would. That's what I was like. I wouldn't be trusting her.
Well, I think if she didn't get back, it was just probably gonna, go into the water and dissolve anyway. So,
but the lack of the question was that's actually a really important thing, especially considering only 2, maybe 3 can be argued that they were actually there on purpose. Everybody else was there by chance.
Yeah.
I mean, Fatima of all people should get like that. She's been like a concubine. She knows what it is like to be kept in a place, not with her consent. So it seems weird that, she wouldn't ask.
Yeah.
I think she was a little bit set on being the hero in that bit though. Like she wanted to do the thing that was gonna save everybody.
So
And she didn't even really think about, could there be someone else that could do this that would be better?
And I think also
I
feeling
could
a little bit
also-
of guilt about it all and wanting to punish herself a little bit.
Yeah.
I could also think that the people who ended up on the island found the island because they actually did want to.
Yeah, that's
Otherwise,
fair.
they wouldn't have. They would have probably just drowned at sea if they didn't actually want to get to the island.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something there that we're not really
Yeah.
seeing necessarily, at least wasn't
Yeah.
spelled out.
I was a little surprised actually too that they didn't lean more into the birds for the
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
I mean they did a
once-
little bit for those characters, but I was
The first,
they did
yeah.
tiny little bit.
Yep.
It was really just that first bit where they first got together after she
Yes.
declared herself the bird king. The others came and she was sort of seeing the bird characters at that stage, and that all sort of petered out, and it was only her being the bird king that really was discussed. But what can I say?
See, I mean, if you're going to make a symbolic story, you got to really lean into it. I
Well, that's the
this
thing.
style of story.
I think that's the thing. Like, I felt like this was supposed to be symbolic, but it wasn't enough to be symbolic, and yet it wasn't bedded enough in realism for me to really enjoy it as a realistic element.
Yeah, it kind of hedged its bets and failed.
Yeah, it didn't quite capture either element for me, and I can't see myself really recommending the book.
Yeah, I don't know that I would.
Yeah, it's not something I'd go, that I'd be pushing into people's hands and saying, oh, you have to read this.
But, and yet, most of the reviews I found online were very complimentary. So, I don't know.
Books are subjective. That's the nature of any kind of art, is that you're always going to find some people that like it and some people that don't. So,
I mean, I recognise that it's definitely not necessarily my normal type of book, just purely because I like books that have clearer cut stories and clearer cut happy endings and things along those lines. And this, while I can appreciate it, its exploration of different themes and their trickiness, and the fact that she didn't make things clear cut, that doesn't make me enjoy it necessarily.
You're not much of a fairy tale person, so I actually was reading through this going, I don't think Mel's going to like this much.
Nope.
I normally like fairy tale, like different interpretations of fairy tales, but that's when I know the fairy tale, and that's why I did feel like, is this based on a fairy tale from another culture that I don't know, and I'm missing something because I don't know that? Because I think when you know the fairy tale and it subverts your expectations by changing things, that's what I find interesting when they do that. Whereas if you don't know the original, it's just a story. And it definitely really felt, especially towards the end, really had fairy tale kind of vibes for me.
Yeah. Very muchly reminded me of those sorts of things where things start happening at the end of like Naomi Novik's books, where it's just sort of starts happening and things are happening and you're like not quite 100% understanding how things are happening.
And it's also because the magic system's very soft. It's not really
very
explained. And I was kind of hoping it would be more explained because he was doing the maps and everything, and I really liked that idea.
But that's probably because that felt like it was leaning more to that harder magic, more explained magic side, whereas everything else was very, very soft. And so perhaps we were leaning, we were going, we want more of this for that reason.
You guys know me. I like the hard magic systems. I like my magic systems to be explained.
There's a reason you read a lot of Brendan Sanderson. It's fine.
But yeah, I think that was part of it. Like I'm not a huge fan of that magical realism kind of genre.
Give it to me.
yeah, and this had lots of it and it still didn't work for you. So
That's right.
Yeah, it's true.
I think
it's got to make some kind of sense, and this did not.
Yeah.
I feel like this is the thing. Like it had lots of things that it was doing, and none of them seriously hit well enough for me to go, this is what this was.
That
so
just
that I can then
reminded me
go
of something in
recommend
the
it to
book
someone.
that I thought might go deeper and then never went far. I can't remember. I don't know if it was Vikram or someone else was asking Hassan questions like, when you were little, did you see
Oh yes,
numbers and color, like numbers that had things had taste and smell and all that. I'm like, synesthesia. That's synesthesia,
That was me
right?
too.
And I'm like, and then he's like, oh yeah, those often come with something or other, and then nothing else. I'm like, God damn it.
Yeah, I was like, oh, I know that. That's a thing. That's a real thing.
Yeah.
And then
I actually didn't like that he did that, but then I was like, oh, maybe this is sort of trying to help explain things. So I was like, okay, well, at least there might be some explanation. And like you said, dropped.
Dropped it. Yeah. I'm like, what?
But that's the thing, right? Like this book just had lots of things, nothing nailed. And so in the end, I think I can't recommend it to someone because I can't say what it was actually like where it would fit. I can't say, oh, this is definitely fairy tale. I can't say this is, hard magic. I can't say that it was a historical, like it's definitely historical, but also it goes so far off that it's not historical.
Yeah, all the historical stuff was like stuff I found out when I was Googling things like, and it was so funny because it's, those things where you hear about a thing and then suddenly it pops up everywhere and you're like, oh, that's that thing I just learned about that I didn't know about. And that was for the people that she was from that were the genocide happened to. I was watching a video about historical historical fashion, and they were talking about the corset that was it Circassian? Was that the name of her people?
I can't remember. I wish I'd written it down.
Because I looked it up because I'm like, that's the name of that corset that they were talking about.
Castilian.
No, not Castilian. The people
Castilian,
she came from.
yeah.
So she was from this group of people. This was a real thing that happened that were basically, there was a genocide and there were no people left from that group of people. And the reason why, and they were supposed to be really seen as very beautiful. And
it wasn't Castilian.
Circassian?
Yeah, Circassian.
Okay. So Google Circassian corset. And it's a thing. And I only just heard about it like a week ago before I read this book. And I was like, that's that same people. And so apparently it was like I don't know if it was what year it was, but at the time, women had heard about this thing and it was kind of almost like the old-timey version of something going viral. And because they had this view that these people were so beautiful, like manufacturers would just put that name in the name of their stuff to make it sound more beautiful so people would buy it. So the corset has got nothing to do with those people other than it's a marketing technique for them to sell it.
Dang.
And yeah, I was watching a YouTube video about it about like a week before I read this book, and I was like, wait a minute, is that the same thing that I was just reading about? Like, and I Googled it and it was. So are
they actually gone? Because there seems to be a lot of videos about their dance and like a wedding and things like that. So are they people who are actually gone, or was it just mostly gone?
I don't know, because I didn't read. Like I said, I watched a YouTube video about it, and most of the video was about this corset. I don't even remember. It was one of those historical costuming people that I watch on YouTube that I watch way too many of. But yeah, like so.
This is all very interesting.
Oh, there we go. Like Circassian women lived as slaves in the Sultan's imperial harem, and Shah's harems started to build their reputation as extremely beautiful and genteel, which then became a common trope in Western Orientalism. Yeah, so Circassian women were thought to be unusually beautiful, spirited, and elegant, and such were desirable as concubines.
Right.
She certainly did a lot of research on it. On the history elements, even though she was clearly not trying to tell she was placing it at a particular time in history, but I don't feel like she was trying to tell that historical story at all.
Yeah, I agree. Like that was just sort of like the sort of context or bubble that she placed it in was during the Spanish Inquisition and the surrender of southern Spain.
Yeah. And if anything, she was more using the conflict of the Inquisition rather than this particular historical time to actually drive a good portion of the plot rather than anything else.
Sorry, I need to not be distracted by the Circassian stuff because it looks a lot like the Turkish folk dancing costumes that I had to make.
Yeah, I know. I opened a whole heap of stuff and said, I'll come back and look at that later. More learning to do from this book. So if anything, my absolute favorite thing that I got out of this book was that I've learned a whole heap of stuff about history from essentially Spain, but before it was Spain,
Mhm.
that I had no idea about. So that's cool. All right, guys, is there anything else we want to raise, or shall we wrap this up?
Okay.
That I can think of.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, for those of you who joined us, thank you very much for watching. And we will be back next month with Catching Teller Crow by, I cannot remember the author. Does anybody remember the author?
Emberlyn Cremalina.
Yeah.
Thank you very
And
much.
Ezekiel.
Thank you, Liz.
Excellent. Very pleased that you knew that, because I forgot to have anything open to remind myself. All right. We'll see you in a month. Bye, guys.